So far, we have looked at basic HTML layout by using commonly used HTML elements such as div, span, table, etc. We've also looked at some basic CSS attributes such as margin, padding, border, and dimension to see how we can assign a shape and a size to HTML elements. In this lab, we shall learn how we can use CSS attributes to control the layout of elements relative to each other. The semantics and commonly used cases for each of these attributes is given in the attached CSS file for reference. We shall start off with positioning or using the CSS position attribute. I would not be exaggerating if I were to say that positioning is everything in modern web page design. By default, every element is positioned as static. So unless you specify a specific value for the CSS position attribute, the browser will consider the position of that element to be static, which means that it will be placed in its default location. So in this case, if we look at the examples here, we find that the div with the ID change me has a class members and another class center assigned to it, right? Now let's look at the CSS file and see what they contain. So as you can see that we have not used any kind of position attribute in the external CSS file. So therefore all these elements are positioned as static. So let's just hit preview and find out what our web page looks like. So this is the div element with ID change me, and it is placed somewhere in the center of our web page. Now what we'll do is we shall change the position of this element to relative. So what relative does is that once you specify the position as relative, that element will be positioned relative to its default or static position. So therefore if we hit preview now, we find that the element is still where it was earlier before we mentioned or specified a value of relative to its position. In fact, I've misspelled position here. So let us correct the error and hit preview again. But you will find that that has not changed. The div is still very much where it was. Now why did that happen? Well, all we've done is we've changed the position from static to relative, but we have not really adjusted the position. Well, how do we do that? The way to do that is by using these additional attributes, namely top, bottom, left and right in conjunction with the position attribute, right? Well, we'll soon find out what that means. So along with position relative, let us specify a top of 10 pixels and a left of 20 pixels. Alright. So now what's going to happen? Let's save the file and hit preview. Okay, so what do you see here? The div has now been pushed down by 10 pixels and pushed to the right by 20 pixels. So what you've done is you've specified a position as relative and you've adjusted the layout or the placement of that div by specifying a value for top and a value for left. Since the position is relative, the adjustment is in reference to the default position of that element. Correct? So I hope that relative positioning is clear. Now what we'll do is we'll change the value of the position attribute to absolute. Alright, so let's do that. Let's hit preview. Well, what happened here? Okay, so when you specify the position of an element as absolute, the element is positioned in relation to its first positioned ancestor. Okay, now what does that mean? In this case, the div with id change me is contained inside the div with id main page. Okay, now main page does not have a specific position specified, so which means that the positioning of main page is static. The parent of the div main page is the body element, right? So what you find is that there is no ancestor for the div change me which has a non-static position, and therefore the placement of the div with id change me is now in relation to the body element. So therefore what you see is that it's pushed down by 10 pixels from the top of the page and pushed to the right by 20 pixels from the left of the page. But what if I had defined a position for the main page div as relative? So let us save this. Let us hit preview. So you see what's happened here? Now this is where the main page div begins. So now, since the main page is non-static positioned, the change me div is positioned in relation to its parent. Okay, and that's happened because you specified a value of absolute to its position. Cool. So far so good. Now what we'll do is we shall look at the fixed positioning. Okay, so let us remove all these attributes now and assign a fixed position. So let's save this. Now for the fixed position to have effect, what I will also do is specify a height to the main page div. Let's say it's 1000 pixels. Now let me save this. Let me hit preview. Okay, so now you can see that what's happened is that the div is positioned, or the change me div is positioned somewhere here. What is also interesting is as I scroll the page, the div appears in the exact same position in reference to your browser window. So a fixed position will place an element in reference to the browser window, so that irrespective of where you are on the page, the div is always in the very same position. Okay, so experiment with positioning. It is very important that you understand exactly how positioning works. Try various position attributes in conjunction with the top, left, right and bottom attributes as well. Just remember that the top, left, right and bottom attributes will have no impact if your position is static.